He was born in 1906 in a village called Tenryu, a place where mountains met river water and days passed with the quiet rhythm of rural life. If you walked through the dusty path that cut the village in two, you would hear hammering before anything else. The ringing sound of metal meeting metal. That was the sound of Gihei Honda, the local blacksmith, repairing horseshoes, sharpening tools, fixing bicycles. And beside him, always watching, always listening, always asking, was his son, Soichiro. He was not a boy meant for stillness. He loved noise, the clang of tools, the hiss of hot iron cooling, the chatter of bicycle chains, and he loved the smell of grease. He would smear it on his hands, face, nose, like a child who had found war paint. His father laughed and told customers, "Someday this boy will make a machine louder than my hammer." No one believed him, not yet. The boy who chased engines. One day, when Soichiro was 8, something happened that changed everything. A car, the first he had ever seen, or drove through the village. The villagers rushed out of their homes, stunned by the strange growling beast rolling over the dirt road. It was huge, smelling of fuel and fire, coughing smoke from its tail. To some, it was frightening. To others, blasphemous. To Soichiro, it was magic. He ran behind it barefoot, kicking up dust, chasing it until his lungs burned. He didn't know who owned it. He didn't know where it came from. He only knew he wanted to understand it. So that night, while his father slept, he tried to draw the machine from memory. Every bolt, every wheel, every impossible movement. He failed. He tried again. He failed again. Failure for Soichiro Honda was not defeat, it was invitation. The decision to leave home. By the time he was 15, Soichiro had outgrown the village. He wanted engines, he wanted noise, he wanted fire, so he left with no money, only a small bag of clothes, a notebook, and a stubborn sense of destiny, and traveled to Tokyo to work as an apprentice mechanic at Art Shokai, a small repair shop run by a man named Shinichiro Kasahara. It was not glamorous. He slept on the floor in the workshop, surrounded by the smell of gasoline and cold iron. He woke before sunrise, cleaned, swept, tightened bolts, burned his hands, cut his fingers, inhaled fumes. But he was happy. This was his temple. Engines were his scripture, and failure was his greatest teacher. Kasahara quickly realized the boy was different. He didn't just follow instructions, he asked why every single time. Why does this piston crack? Why does this valve sing? Why does this engine hesitate in the rain? He wanted to know everything, and he learned fast. The birth of a mechanic. By his late teens, he was no longer just sweeping floors, he was tuning engines with the precision of a surgeon. Kasahara trusted him with repair jobs no apprentice should ever touch. Sometimes, after the shop closed, the two would sit beside a dismantled engine late into the night. Kasahara smoked. Honda took notes. Engines, Honda would say softly, are like people. They tell you when they're unhappy. Kasahara would laugh. But unlike people, he replied, engines don't lie. Those nights shaped him more than any school could. The racer Art Shokai wasn't just a repair shop, it was also a racing garage. And when races came to Tokyo, mechanics became drivers. Soichiro Honda, still practically a boy, became obsessed. He tuned cars all day and raced them on weekends. He crashed more times than he won. He broke ribs, shattered bones, lost consciousness in accidents, but each crash taught him something new. He once told a friend, "Speed is wisdom at full volume." It terrified Kasahara. He begged Honda to stop, afraid he would kill himself. But for Honda, it wasn't about adrenaline. It was about understanding machines at their limits and himself at his. Tokai Seiki, the first dream. By his mid-20s, Soichiro Honda had learned enough to build something of his own. So in 1937, he founded Tokai Seiki, a small factory producing piston rings for Toyota. He was brilliant but reckless with his early designs. His rings failed quality tests. Toyota rejected them. Employees quit. Friends told him to give up, but he refused. He went back to school, literally taking engineering classes to understand metallurgy, combustion, and elasticity. He worked until his fingers blistered, until the metal dust painted his clothes gray, until he solved the puzzle. His piston rings eventually passed Toyota's test. Orders grew. His small factory expanded. For a moment, a brief, fragile moment, his future seemed unstoppable. Fire from the sky. Then came war. By 1944, the Pacific was in flames. The Allied bombings hit industrial targets across Japan. Toyota's factories burned. Mitsubishi's plants collapsed. And one night, Tokai Seiki, Soichiro Honda's life's work, was hit. It wasn't targeted specifically, it was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The bombs fell like iron rain. Explosions tore through walls. Machines melted. Workers scrambled for cover. Honda ran through smoke, screaming names of employees searching for survivors. When the fires died, his factory was gone. All that remained were twisted beams, burnt metal, and the smell of ash. He stood in silence, listening to the crackling ruins. Years of work, years of dreams, all reduced to black dust. He later said, "I never cried for what I lost. I cried for what I believed Japan had lost." The day the empire fell. Then, in August 1945, the unthinkable happened. Japan surrendered, cities lay in ruins, factories were rubble, food was scarce, money was meaningless. The country he loved, proud, disciplined, ancient, was now broken. People walked the streets barefoot, hungry, searching for anything to trade. Black markets grew, children begged, men bartered tools for rice. Soichiro Honda returned to his destroyed factory and felt something inside him crack. He had nothing left. No money, no equipment, no workers, no future. And yet, he smiled. Because where others saw ashes, he saw raw material. The decision that changed everything. He sold the remnants of his factory to Toyota for a small sum of money and a handful of tools. With that, he built a tiny wooden shed in Hamamatsu. Nothing more than a shack, a roof, a workbench, a dream. Japan needed hope. Japan needed mobility. Japan needed something cheap, small, simple. Something that could survive a country with no gasoline, no roads, no anything. Soichiro Honda decided to build it. He took leftover generator engines, salvaged from abandoned military equipment, and strapped them onto bicycles. No one had ever seen such a thing. No one thought it would work. No one believed people would buy them. He didn't care. He built one, then another, then 100, then thousands. Women, delivery boys, farmers, teachers. Everyone bought them. Because Japan didn't just need engines. Japan needed motion. In the first months after the war, while the country mourned defeat, Honda put Japan back on wheels. The spark. One evening, as he tested an engine outside his shack, a neighbor approached him and said, "You're just one man. How can you think you can fix Japan?" Honda wiped oil from his hands, grinned, and replied, "One bolt at a time." That night, he lay awake, listening to the distant sound of bicycles, his bicycles, whirring through the broken streets of his country. He closed his eyes and whispered, "This is only the beginning." And he was right, because what started in a shack would become the foundation of one of the greatest economic miracles in human history. The wooden shack that became a revolution. In the winter of 1946, Hamamatsu was a landscape of broken roofs and hungry faces. But inside a small wooden shed that smelled of oil and sawdust, Soichiro Honda worked like a man possessed. Generator engines, bicycle frames, hand tools, nothing matched, nothing fit, nothing was designed to go together. But he made them go together. When fuel was scarce, he adapted engines to run on turpentine, alcohol, even pine oil. When metal was rationed, he scavenged scrap from abandoned factories and bombed out houses. When rubber was impossible to find, he reforged tires from melted down hoses. People called him crazy. He called himself a mechanic. The first time he rode his motorized bicycle down the street, children ran behind him laughing. Not at him. At the shock of seeing something alive in a city of ghosts. It wasn't just a machine, it was hope with wheels, the birth of Honda Motor Company. By 1948, demand had exploded. People needed mobility, people needed to work again, people needed life to move, so Soichiro Honda founded Honda Motor Co. with one room, one desk, and a handful of employees who didn't believe in engines as much as they believed in him. He had no business plan, no factory, no money for salaries, but he had fire in his eyes and grease on his hands. And in post-war Japan, that was enough to gather followers. He told new hires, "We will rebuild Japan." And I don't mean someday, I mean now. For many, he sounded like a poet drunk on gasoline. For others, he sounded like the future, failure after failure, and why he loved it. The first real Honda motorcycle, the A-Type, was terrible, heavy, underpowered, ugly, unstable, smoky. It shook violently at high speeds. It overheated constantly. Customers returned it with polite apologies or angry curses. Most companies would panic. Honda laughed. "Good, we found what doesn't work," he shouted, pointing at a stack of broken engines. He taught his workers something radical. We don't fear mistakes, we harvest them. He believed the quickest road to innovation was paved with embarrassment. Soon after, he unveiled the Dream Type D, a better machine with a pressed steel frame and bright red paint. People still didn't buy it. Another failure, another lesson. He wrote in his notes, "Success is 99% failure," a line he would repeat for the rest of his life. Japan begins to rise. By the early 1950s, Japan was shifting, slowly, painfully, but undeniably. Factories restarted, railways repaired, exports returned. Children went to school with full lunches again. Engineers, workers, and ordinary people performed what the world later called the economic miracle. But to them, it was simply survival with dignity. Honda watched this rise and felt something ignite inside him. He wanted to make a machine that wasn't just functional. He wanted a machine that would define the new Japan, a machine the world had never seen, the idea that changed everything. In 1956, Honda gathered his small team and said, "I want to build a motorcycle for everyone, not just for men, not just for racers, for housewives, for students, for farmers, for anyone who needs to move." He wrote 3 words on a chalkboard: cheap, clean, quiet. His engineers were confused. Motorcycles were loud, dirty, reserved for young men and daredevils. Honda was asking them to reinvent the idea of a motorcycle, and so they did. 3 years later, in 1958, Honda unveiled the machine that changed the world, the Super Cub, a small, friendly-looking, step-through motorcycle with a 4-stroke engine. No manual clutch, low vibration, easy maintenance, elegant curves, quiet operation, incredible fuel efficiency, and it was cheap, unbelievably cheap. It wasn't macho, it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't intimidating, it was perfect. Honda smiled and said, "This is for the people who never thought they could ride." The Super Cub revolution. Sales exploded instantly. Housewives used it to shop for groceries. Delivery boys used it to carry noodles through crowded alleys. Farmers rode it to fields miles from home. Students commuted to school. You could carry bags on it, ride it in the rain, fix it yourself, teach your grandma to drive it. The Super Cub didn't just sell. It spread across villages, cities, islands, and eventually the entire world. It became the best-selling motor vehicle of all time. Today, there are over 100 million of them, and the world still hasn't made a motorcycle more reliable. The culture shift. But the real miracle wasn't the Super Cub. It was what it taught Japan. Honda's manufacturing style, obsession with quality, respect for failure, engineering discipline, worker autonomy, small improvements every day, became the DNA of modern Japanese industry. Factories adopted Kaizen, continuous improvement. Companies focused on precision over speed. Schools taught discipline, craftsmanship, teamwork. The country that once produced swords now produced precision engines, radios, cameras, and cars the world couldn't ignore. And Soichiro Honda, a skinny mechanic with oil on his face and burns on his hands, became the symbol of a nation's rebirth, the Le Mans revelation. In 1964, Honda visited the Le Mans racetrack in France. The noise was deafening. Engines screamed, rubber burned, the crowd roared. But Honda didn't watch the racers. He watched the pit crews, their coordination, their discipline, their small movements executed with surgical precision. He whispered to himself, "This is Japan. This is what we must become." 2 years later, Honda motorcycles won the world championship. Journalists were stunned. How could a company from a war-torn country, barely 20 years old, defeat Europe's giants? Soichiro Honda said simply, "Because we improved one mistake at a time." The car that shocked America. No. By the late 1960s, Honda set his sights on automobiles. Everyone laughed. Toyota, Nissan, Ford, GM. "You're just a motorcycle company," they said. "You're a mechanic with big dreams." He smiled and replied, "I'm still a mechanic. And mechanics fix what engineers complicate." In 1972, Honda released the Civic. Compact, fuel efficient, clean running, affordable, beautifully engineered. It hit the US market just as the oil crisis erupted. Americans lined up to buy them. Honda dealerships sold out, rivals panicked. Japan had done the impossible. It built a better car than America, and a mechanic had led the way. The philosophy that built a nation. Soichiro Honda became a global icon. An inventor, a teacher, a rebel, a craftsman, a philosopher in overalls. He refused suits, rarely wore ties, and often walked into meetings smelling faintly of engine oil. His greatest quotes became national mantras. "Success is 99% failure. Do not fear failure. Fear the absence of effort. Create something the world has never seen. Respect your workers. They are your engine." These ideas didn't just build a company, They built a country. Japan's economic miracle didn't come from politicians. It came from workers like Soichiro Honda, men who built with hands, sweat, stubbornness, and impossible dreams. The final ride. In the 1980s, when he grew too old to run the company, Honda retired, but not in spirit. He spent his remaining years visiting factories unannounced, speaking with young engineers, tinkering with engines, and giving advice like a grandfather guiding grandchildren. Employees said he was happiest when kneeling on a concrete floor with a wrench in his hand. When he died in 1991 at the age of 84, Japan mourned as if it had lost a national treasure. And in many ways, it had. The legacy. Today, millions of people around the world ride the Super Cub every day. Teenagers, workers, grandmothers, Honda cars drive through every country. Honda engines power boats, generators, planes, tools. Honda Racing wins championships. The mechanic who once slept on a dirt floor in a Tokyo workshop has become the heartbeat of a global industry. And his message is still alive. The world is moved by those who keep moving. Final reflection. If you could follow Soichiro Honda at dawn, when he was young, broke, burned by failure, surrounded by ashes, you would see him hammering metal with greasy hands, smiling as sparks fell around him. Because he wasn't building machines, he was building possibility. He didn't just rebuild his own life, he helped rebuild Japan. One bolt, one bike, one dream at a time.